CapeTalk. Pippa's on Twitter.
You can tweet her at PJC Hudson.
I'm not quite sure how to introduce today's book club pick because it's not a book that fits easily into many boxes. It definitely sits in the category of literary fiction. This is not something you're going to grab to take on holiday and dash through at the poolside and leave behind next to the leftover lime wedge at the bottom of your mojito, okay? It demands a bit more of you as a reader, and it's going to linger a lot longer than the aftermath of said mojito. I guess you could call it a bit of magic realism. It's certainly got elements of the absurd. There are times when I felt like I was reading a Monty Python script. There were moments when I thought of Terry Pratchett. Look, I don't know where you'd put it in the bookstore, other than that I would say you should put it front and center because it is definitely one of my favorite reads of the year so far in all its dark and quirky weirdness and loveliness. And in fact, this is a book that I loved so much, I had to keep putting it down and slowing myself down so that I could make it last a little bit longer. It's a book called Buried Treasure, and it's set largely in a graveyard in the fictional town of Vivo, and it features a cast of ghosts who haven't quite fully departed. There is an old undertaker named Mateus, there is his young girl apprentice called Novo, a dog named God thanks to an accident of dyslexia, there is a boy named Augustine who interprets the world through flowers, and there are lots and lots of important pigeons as well. You get my drift. It is a strange cast of characters in a strange setting, and they all come together in the most beautiful way. It is such a beautifully crafted book that it is hard to believe it is the work of a debut author, but that it is, and it is such a pleasure to have him with us on the line from Durban via Zoom. Sven Axelrad, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pippa. How are you doing? Lovely to be on the show.
Thank you. It's great to have you with us. And thank you. I mean, I just absolutely loved this book, and I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time because it is so very different from anything I've read in a long, long time. Sven, given that this is your book, you are a bit of an unknown entity as an author. And just about the only thing I know about you is that you're an accountant. Now, how does a guy who is this good with words end up actually working with numbers?
That's a great question, and not an easy one to answer as well. But I mean, let's face it, we all get told what to do. We choose what we're going to do for our careers when we're 17 years old. Yeah. And it's possible I made a terrible mistake and became an accountant. But saying that, it's actually been a lovely mix of professions. It wasn't at first. At first, I kind of thought it was a massive problem, and I was a bit depressed, in the daytime, serious with numbers, and at night trying to do something creative. But after a long time, I kind of figured out that it is a strength. I think a lot of creatives battle with routine and perseverance, but the accountant side of me has that stuff down. Okay. So yeah, eventually I learned to harness it and sort of got the two together.
Okay.
Saying that, I didn't think I was going to be a writer. I always thought I was going to be like a rock star. When I first chose to be an accountant, I was like, oh, it's not a problem because it only lasts a couple of years and then I'll be a famous musician. But that didn't quite work out for me.
That didn't pan out according to plan. Okay, well, the rock star, the music world's loss is fiction's gain. Sven, I mean, talk to us about getting this book published. How long did it take to go from the concept and the first spark of the idea of Buried Treasure to actually seeing your book on a shelf in print?
Wow, so that's actually a crazy one. Would you believe that you said it doesn't sound like the work of a debut author, which is lovely. The truth is, it's my fifth book that I've written. Wow. It's just the first one that I've managed to get into print. Okay. And rightly so, it's the one that I felt really passionate about. When I was writing it, I knew I'd hit onto something special with it. And so maybe 15 to 20 years, I've been quietly writing away. If you walk into a Durban coffee shop, I'm a fixture in the corner, headphones on, typing away on my laptop. Very much in private. I haven't really spoken to anyone about it. Talking to you guys, on the radio as well, is very foreign to me. I've kept a secret largely for 15 years. Wow. So to finally make it into print has been a massive journey. And also, just a quick little aside, shout out to anyone who's chasing down a dream and feels like it's not going anywhere. Bit of perseverance, and life is funny. It's full of surprises. It's full of bad surprises too, but some of them absolutely wonderful. And eventually I got a call from Penguin. Would you believe, on my birthday last year?
Oh wow!
Yeah, they had no idea. I had actually forgotten that I submitted this book. I'd kind of I had just gone through a disappointment with the previous book, and then they submitted this one. I submitted this one, and I'd forgotten about it. And on my birthday in the afternoon, I got a call from Penguin to tell me that they were going to publish. I mean, can you imagine a better birthday present?
That's better than all the cake in the world, for sure. Sven, I mean, you talk about life being full of surprises, but this is a book that shows us that perhaps the afterlife is full of surprises as well. I mean, what makes a writer wake up one morning and decide, I want to write a book set in a graveyard with hauntings and ghosts that focuses on the question of the importance of names and the question of what happens after death? I'm intrigued to know the spark of inspiration behind it all.
Yeah, I mean, it is set in the graveyard largely, but I didn't write it to talk about death in any way. I really wanted to talk about life and how complex it is. And if you think about it, writing about life, who better to talk about it than someone who's lived the whole thing and died? If you ask me right now, while I'm in it, how's this interview going? I'll say, I really don't know, and I'm in the middle of it. But if you ask me in a couple of hours, once I've had time to decompress and think about it, maybe I'll have a better perspective, and I'll be like, oh no, I really duffed it, or I did a great job. But so far, thanks. So that's why I wanted to have the cast of recently dead characters hanging around, because they've got a perspective on what's going on here that we don't have quite yet. Saying that they're in the middle of their death, so they don't really know what's going on with their deaths either. So it kind of shows that life remains full of surprises, as you said, once it's finished. Yeah.
And sorry if I may interrupt, and I just want to share a little quote with our authors from the book, because there's this wonderful sense of, the afterlife being a continuation of the thinking and the loving and the disappointments and the conversations. And there's this wonderful quote quite early on that the living are probably unaware of the types of conversations the dead have with one another. The self-centeredness is understandable. Life, like diabetes, is a demanding condition, and being alive, much like being in love, is a constant distraction. The truth is that conversations among the dead aren't so different, excepting the biological concerns of the living, breakfast, back pain, and so on. Time passes slowly in a graveyard, and a good conversation or argument goes a long way. And the arguments between these quite recently dead characters are absolutely delightful. Did you imagine yourself as one of them, Sven, as you were writing it?
I think that's one of those egotistical things about writers. We sort of put ourselves into all of our characters, really. Yeah. But I think, I'm very lucky to have a small group of very good friends that love a good hypothetical question and conversation, and we'll sit around at night throwing out strange ideas and talking them through. And I think some people, you'll ask me, how did I get such a crazy and interesting idea? But I don't think it's always me. I think I know a lot of crazy and interesting people, and I steal little bits of conversations from them. And as a writer, you're always borrowing from the people that you know and love.
Well, thank you to all the crazy and interesting people who gave us this book, because I loved it. Just for anybody who's come in late to the conversation, my guest joining us from Durban via Zoom is author Sven Axelrad. His debut novel, Buried Treasure, has just been published by Umutsi, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And it is a book that's very hard to pin down and categorize. It is darkly funny. And Sven, I'm intrigued to know, you've obviously got that kind of sense of humor, and I've seen a lot of listeners, of early readers, who've just loved it and drawn the parallels to the Terry Pratchett's and the kind of quirky, offbeat humor, not the sort of classically funny, if I can put it that way. Do you worry about that sort of, that as you're writing, that maybe the next reader isn't going to get it, or is going to find it too dark, or perhaps even disrespectful in some respects of what is allowed to happen to the ghosts and the bodies in the graveyard? Or is that something you just sort of set aside as you wrote?
I think, that is a good question. I think that my sense of humor and what works about my personality is that I love to jump in and out of serious and frivolous parts of conversation. And I think that the reader, for all its weirdness and commentary, this book is built on an underground sort of foundation of kindness, which is, I'm kind of looking at what's left once you strip our names away, and who are we? And the answer I hope to find is that we're all in this together, this life or this death together. And I think that people are responding well to the kindness at the heart of this book, which makes me think that I don't risk offending anyone. I think you could tell almost by tone that you're having a cheeky conversation with a friend. You're not having a you're not being preached at or told what to think or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I hope so. I hope that comes through. And when I'm writing it, to be honest, I don't think at all about that stuff. But I was having a blast while I was writing it. This book, more than any other, poured out of me really quickly.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in that coffee shop in the corner, chuckling away to myself while I was, highly entertained by my characters. And I don't really think about it. And you must remember, again, I've been writing in secret for 15 years, even at this point. So it's not crossing my mind what the public's going to think of it, because there is no public at that point.
Yeah. Sven, I have to give an honorary mention to the dog named God, because Mateus, who I don't know if we can use the word owned really, but Mateus, who was bonded with the dog, is or was dyslexic, and when he set down the very important task of getting the dog's name tag printed, he wrote out the name to give to the person doing the printing, and of course he's dyslexic, so he mixed up the letters, and you have this wonderful character of the dog named God being a central character in a book about the afterlife. I mean, it gets as tangled as it can. I noticed on your website, I couldn't help noticing, Sven, you've obviously got your own dog who's very important to you, albeit very different in shape and size from the one in this book. Talk to us about the task of making an animal a central character, even though it's a dog that doesn't speak very much. You have access to some of the thoughts and observations, but you place God as a character alongside the ghosts just as highly.
Yes, very much. I mean, obviously you can tell I love animals, and I'm dying to write a cat into a book at some point, but I've never had a cat, so I'm a little bit worried that I'll get that wrong. Most people worry about, as a man, writing female characters and that, but I'm more worrying about writing a cat. But I have a little Yorkie, and the emotions and the connection to dogs in particular is just such a wonderful thing, and I had to get it into a book. And this character is a little bit different, as you know, and it was just such a wonderful metaphor and allegory for God's involvement. Like we're just as complicated as life as navigating love and back pain and breakfast and all those things. Faith is obviously a part of that, and it's very difficult to navigate for whatever you believe. Yeah. And I think having God as a character sort of echoed my own experience, which is, God exists very much so, because, we can feel the effect, but it also is a bit mysterious, a little bit grumpy, maybe aloof sometimes, but hard to understand the motive, Yeah. And I stumbled across the character myself. I'm not a planner, so like I said, I was entertaining myself. This stuff arrives to me sort of unexpectedly as it arrives to you as a reader. And when I came up with the God thing, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm not boosting myself. I loved playing with that. Of course, my Yorkie would be a terrifying prospect to be God. I think she's probably as ferocious as the God in my book, but also extremely needy, which it doesn't seem like a good combination for a deity.
Sven, I mean, you've just said you're not a planner, and I'm a little astounded to hear you say that, given the work of weaving that it takes to bring the different plot lines all together very neatly at the end of this book, the way you connect the dots of what have seemed to be completely disparate stories, and then all of a sudden you have that bit, that's how it all fits together. I saw one critic saying it's like working on a beautiful big jigsaw puzzle, and then all of a sudden you get the sense of what the picture on the box actually looks like. I mean, it astounds me that you were able to do that if you're not a planner. I mean, did you just sort of set off and let's see where this plot line takes us? Because there is a lot of sort of writing sideways and backwards and weaving the stories around one another and back in time, and it's a very complexly plotted book. So please tell us a little bit more about how you pull that off if you're not a planner.
I have no idea. It's luck. I don't know. Accident of fate. No, I don't plan. I'm not. I really mean that. It's the way my brain works. I've said it for years. When people ask me about this book, and I would say it is the most insight you'll have into the way that my thoughts work. And if I plan things out at front, and so if I sat down and wrote out a timeline, and this character needs to do this and that, my writing would become boring. I think it seems like I'm an ideas writer more than a plot writer. So as long as the ideas are left, the plot's left open, then the ideas are available to me at all times. Plot's actually one of my weaknesses as a writer, I would say. And luckily, I think by accident of, I don't know, whatever you like to call it, the piecing things together quickly is one of my strengths. So I think that I'm just lucky that one of my strengths makes up for one of my weaknesses. But I really go into it blind. If you'd asked me, if you'd stopped me halfway through the book and said, where are we heading? I would say I would have been able to vaguely point in a direction and say, I think I'm going to end up there somewhere. It seems to me like it's going that way. But I couldn't tell you exactly. And it all just sort of comes to me as and when I'm in the scene.
And as you write in one chapter, you're not a courier service delivering the plot from point A to point B in a straight line, that's for sure. Again, just for the sake of anybody who's tuned in late, you are listening to author Sven Axelrad talking to me about his first novel, Buried Treasure, which has just been published by Umutsi, an imprint of Penguin Random House. And Sven, let's talk about the location. I mean, Vivo is a fictional town, but it's one I think a lot of readers are going to read a lot of South Africa into. It's got a lot to recognize in the extreme poverty, in the abandoned street people, in the violence committed against them, and most notably in the bureaucracy of the municipal service. So there are these wonderful scenes of characters trying to interact with the municipality of Vivo, requesting help with the mix-up that's going on in the graveyard and other assorted, and getting lost in the menu of please push 1 for to file a complaint, push 2 to get your latest bill, and never getting anywhere. I mean, I'm sure it's not a direct allegory for South Africa, but was it your intention to let us have enough of the familiar in there to feel like this could be set here?
For sure. I mean, that doesn't take any imagination, right, to be frustrated with the municipality. But it's again, exactly that. I mean, it is, you borrow from everything around you. And I wanted it to be slightly familiar, but I also wanted it to sort of remain allegorical so that it could be every town and we could all relate to it. Maybe, I feel like somebody who picked the book up and say, Lisbon could feel a bit of Lisbon in there as well.
Yep.
And largely a tribute to the heroes that I sort of have taken from literature, which are a lot of the South American magical realists. Yep. Roberto Bolaño, whose book features in my book, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez and those writers, Isabel Allende. There's just such wonderful writers that write out of South America and Spain, and I wanted it to sort of be a little bit of a tribute to my heroes as well as a South African feel to it. And yes, there's a lot of South African there. We can't deny it. Yeah.
Okay. To quote from the back cover, Vivo is a town with a pigeon messaging service, a phone booth used for romantic encounters, and a number of residents who are not quite what they seem, including a prostitute, a professor, and a prophetic flower seller. And the coffee is hellishly strong as well. Sven, the flower seller, Augustine, was one of my favorite characters. There is this wonderful, on one level, sense of innocence about this boy who has been so maltreated by life, but who has this wonderful capacity to view the world through, I guess you could call it, a vocabulary of flowers. And, reading it, I was sort of aware in the back of my mind that in Victorian eras, there were sort of certain flowers stood for certain things. There was a kind of a language of and symbolism of flowers, but it's not quite that. I mean, tell us a little bit more about Augustine and that wonderful ability and where that character sprang from.
I mean, first of all, Pippa, you sound like you should write a novel. You really describe the stuff better than I do.
I'll stick to radio for now. Thanks, Sven. It sounds like a lot of work. But thank you.
So I'm glad you like Augustine. He's also one of my favorites. And so I'm just trying to think about it. So first of all, my wife is very much a plant person, and we don't have a lot of interest in common. I'm always running to bookstores and she's always running to plant nurseries and things. And I really lean heavily on her knowledge. I'd sort of stop every once in a while and look up and say, what is that plant again? And sort of get her opinions on where they grow best and which ones would be together. And she would often correct me if I used the wrong words and things. But I really love this idea of, one never wants to explain too much of their personal things, but I really identified with Augustine in my younger childhood, and
Okay.
I think there's this idea of not feeling lovable or loved that is so universal to people, and often so surprising to everybody that knows them. You know, if you met Augustine, you might think this is an amazing kid who's, you know, got these powers, and like everyone sees him as a saint and able, you know, such a wonderful thing, but they don't consider him as a real person. And I think we walk around like that. We see people, you know, maybe there's someone who's, you're on the radio, someone's a rugby star, whatever it might be, and we don't actually think of them as a real person with defects and challenges. And that's one of the lovely things about writing, is that you get to really consider people. And I feel like I'm a much kinder person on the page than I am in reality, you know, because I get to sort of justify everybody's motives. If someone's acting badly, I don't have to just dislike them. I can ask myself why, and, you know, maybe by understanding them, forgive them a little bit.
Yeah.
And I really loved Augustine's connection to animals and to flowers, and also, I suppose that, like I said, it's like the character that connects to me the most, because as a writer, I'm sort of walking around seeing the world a little bit differently. I'm seeing it in terms of story. You know, sometimes I'm talking to people and I can see the way that they speak, the patterns that they speak, and, you know, what it would look like on a page, or that they use. Like I told you, I'm stealing little bits of phrases from people when they say something clever, and you notice things that other people aren't paying attention to, perhaps, which is very much what Augustine's doing. You know, he's sitting talking to people and actually visibly seeing flowers grow out of them, and a bit of a blessing and a curse, I think.
Yeah, and an extraordinary character. Sven, we've run out of time. I've so enjoyed speaking to you, and I can see our listeners are so enjoying listening to you, and I hope they're going to follow through on that by going to buy a copy of Buried Treasure. Very quickly, where to from here? I think I remember seeing an interview with you on social media some time ago where you indicated there might be a sequel in the works, and I was quite surprised because it felt to me like a perfectly completed novel. Did I misread, or am I right?
I love that you think it's perfectly completed, and you're right and you're wrong, which is kind of perfect for Vivo, right? It's complicated.
Yes, indeed.
So right now, this is my only publication, but I'm loving working with Penguin Random House. They've been so wonderful to me, and I've got awesome agents and that out there walking the streets and looking out for me. So I've got a feeling something else is on its way, and I have written. I won't call it a sequel to Buried Treasure. It's a separate story completely, a new cast of characters, but it happens in the same location. So you're going to have the same sort of feel and the same voice of a narrator and all that kind of crazy happening, but very much more set in the university, sort of with a younger cast of friends, bit of a coming of age story. And if Buried Treasure was sort of about identity and who we are without our names, then the next one will be more along the lines of, what do you want and how much you're willing to pay to get it. And I'll leave that as a bit of a teaser.
And I will leave the interview waiting with bated breath for the next book. Sven Axelrad, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. The author is Sven Axelrad, spelled Axelrad. For those who are asking, the book is called Buried Treasure, published by Penguin Random House and available in all good bookstores and online now.